Hello, everyone. Today I am talking to Steve Nazarian, who is in Charlotte, North Carolina. Hi, Steve. How are you?
Good. How are you doing today?
I'm good, thanks. I'm very looking forward to the show on February 14th. The theme is going to be tattoo, and you send me a wonderful story. I can't wait for people to hear it. You have a little bit, if not a lot, of experience in storytelling. Can you tell us how it got started?
Well, my live storytelling started about 4 years ago when I moved from upstate New York to North Carolina. And I was just sort of looking for groups of people to connect with, living in a new city, not really knowing anybody. And I found the Charlotte Storytellers group, and it dovetailed rather nicely with, for the 5 years before that, I'd been writing a blog that was all sort of personal narrative type stories, but I'd never performed them live. I'd just written them and put them out in the world to see. And that had actually evolved into a book that I published as well. But the live storytelling now has been about 4 years. And I'll be honest, I really can't get enough of both performing it myself, but then also being involved in the process of helping other people develop their stories and perform them also.
Mm-hmm. How do you feel that practice has sort of seeped into your writing?
Well, one of the things that the group here, who, when I came to them, the collective experience for live storytelling is substantial. And when you're performing something live, it needs to be very streamlined. It needs to be very efficient. The audience tends to not have a lot of patience for you plattering on about details that aren't important to the story. And when you're writing something for the page or for the screen, you get a little more latitude about sort of delving into flowery details. But when you're performing, you got to keep it moving. So I've been able to take that process, and some of the folks who are the more experienced story developers and editors. I told my friend Carla last week when we were going through a story of mine that as I had done the last round of editing before presenting it, I said, I kept hearing her voice saying, I know that's important to you, but it's not important to the story, so cut it out. And so that sort of mantra, that sort of process of really being critical of your own details and making sure that they're important to the story, even though they might be important to you, they're not necessarily important to the story, and having the guts to cut them out.
Right. It's Stephen King's idea of killing your darlings.
Yes, it's hard.
Yeah, it's hard because we fall in love with our writing and we're like, no, this is so good.
You weren't there. You don't know if that was important. Yeah. And and it was if you were there, but none of these people were there. So cut it out. Yep.
Yeah. Oh, that's great. And then, so I guess if we go backwards a bit, did you always feel like you could share your own stories? Is that something that was just part of your culture? Or,
it's always been. My father was an English major and ended up as a pediatrician. But one of the things he always sort of taught us in our family was to take the time to explain yourself and to talk about the details. And one of the things he did when my brother and sister and I were younger, and I've done with my 4 kids, is when we wanted to do something, he would never say no up front. He would hand us a legal pad like this and say, go write it out. Tell me what's going to happen. Where are you going to go? Who are you going to see? What's it going to cost? Where are you going to park the car? And so by basically telling the story of what we wanted to do, we pretty much would come to the conclusion on our own that either this is going to fly, or halfway through it be like, oh, there's just no way they're ever going to let me do this. So we would come back and say, oh, here's the details. Or, you know what, I decided it's probably not such a great idea. So, storytelling was sort of part of not only of our social tradition in my family, but sort of my parents' parenting style. And I always wanted to tell stories around campfires, or I'm always the one at a party where somebody will come up and say, hey, Steve, tell that story about that. Someone remembers something I told before and wants me to repeat it. So it's always something that's come naturally to me. Though my wife says when I'm talking a little bit too much, she'll be standing back and I'll be telling a story or giving a presentation or speech or something, and I'll see this. And that's her way of saying, wrap it up.
Yeah. Well, it's great to have her sometimes, I'm sure.
Oh, it is. No. She keeps me honest.
Yeah. Okay, and so these days with the pandemic, you seem to have a pretty active storytelling group. How are you guys getting together these days?
We're getting together by Zoom every other week. We have a theme for each meeting. And when we used to meet live, we do a lot more sort of warm-ups and improv exercises and things like that before getting into story workshopping. And now we do a little bit of that. We'll do our sort of round the table check-ins and maybe a couple of rounds of 3-sentence stories or things like that. But then we'll spend the majority of our time hearing people's new stories and doing our best to be constructive but not critical in our feedback. And it's not the same, but it's certainly better than nothing. And I think what's interesting, like you were saying that you launched your program before COVID because you wanted it to be international. And so we have a lot of members who used to come and have now left Charlotte and now live in New York or LA or even Europe. And they've actually been coming.
Oh, that's
so,
great.
Even though there are some downsides to what's happening, we have been able to reconnect with some folks that we knew in the past that we weren't seeing regularly. So I guess it all comes out, but I am looking forward to being in a room with an audience once again someday.
Yeah, I'm sure. So in the meantime, this will be on Bodies of Stories on February 14th. This will be your officially first time performing a story of yours in front of an audience online.
Yeah.
How do you feel about that?
Well, I feed off audience response. I feed off laughter and sighs and so on. So I think that'll be interesting to be able to sort of modulate my own pacing so that I don't step over people's hopefully laughter. That's probably my biggest fear, is that because there's a little bit of a lag, there's a little bit of buffering, so not to be able to have that direct connection. But the few stories I've done in an informal setting using this technology have worked out fine. So I'm excited to reach a wider and different audience.
Yeah.
I appreciate the opportunity to give that a go.
Oh, yeah. Thank you. And for people who have never told stories, would you have any last words, any piece of advice?
Yeah, I guess it's very simply, don't be afraid to start. We've had a lot of people in our group who come week after week after week and just sit and listen. And when we ask, hey, why don't you tell a story? And I'm not ready. Well, just tell the story. Don't overthink it. Don't think you have to write it. We all have that ability inherently as human beings to communicate through stories. So just start, and you don't have to be embarrassed about it. And the storytelling community is very kind and very supportive in helping people up into a level of comfort. So just start. That's all I can say.
Great advice. Thank you so much. Well, everyone tune in on February 14th. Steve, thank you so much for talking to me today. And
my pleasure. And I look forward to seeing you in a week and a half.
All right.
Okay.
Thanks.
Bye-bye.
Bye.